all of a sudden, there was a blaze of light, and Swami appeared out of that blaze of light from like the waist up. He was above me. I reached up and I held his hand. He held my hand, and he said, "Don't worry, I'm always with you."
Sairam, dear listeners, welcome to Sai SOUL 100. Our guest today is Brother Howard Levin, who is joining us from Feathered Pipe Ranch in Montana. Sairam, Brother Howard, thank you for joining Sai SOUL 100.
Sairam, thank you. You're welcome.
Sairam, please share your story.
The story begins, I went to India in 1968, just to backpack around. I was kind of like a hippie. And in 1969, I was up in Almora, India, studying Ayurveda with Dr. Bindu Joshi, who was one of the foremost Ayurvedic doctors of his time. And he gave me my first Bhagavad Gita. I had never even heard of the Bhagavad Gita. And so I read the Bhagavad Gita, and I kept getting stuck on the chapter where Krishna says to Arjuna, "I incarnate from age to age." And I just kept reading that over and over again. And I was thinking, if God could really incarnate on the earth like Krishna says in the Gita, then this would be the time for him to be here, because it was a time of Cold War between the United States and Soviet Union. And we were raised as kids with the threat of nuclear war and all that. And I just felt like this would be a time, if this was really true. And Dr. Bindu said to me, he said, "You have to sit at the feet of a truly enlightened master." And so after that, sometime after that, I was in Benares, and I stayed up all night at a Shiva temple. I think it was Shivaratri. There was puja all night long on the Ghats. And then in the morning, I was sitting on the Ghats, and I just prayed to God, and I said, "If you've incarnated on the earth, I want to find you and be with you, And a few months later, I walked into the gates at Whitefield, June 5th, 1970. So that was 55 years ago. And, Swami was not as well known, and there weren't that many people there. And so in fact, the second day I ever saw him, he invited us to live in his house. And there was 20 of us, young foreigners from the United States, Canada, Germany, the UK, like that. And he said we could all come and stay with him in his house, his old bungalow at Whitefield. This was before they built the lotus-shaped house. And in the very, very first interview we were in, he was going like this with his fingers, and he was saying, when the devotee longs for God, God longs for the devotee, and he was trying to go like this. He said, like a stalactite and stalagmite in a cave. And he said, this is not a good example. So he went like this, and he waved his hand, and he materialized a round black stone that was solid. And he passed it around, and we all looked at it. And it was just a round stone. And then he held it up to his mouth, and he blew on it, and he blew a little cave in it. And inside the cave was a stalactite and a stalagmite. And he said, "See, like that." And he passed the stone around. So that was the first miraculous experience. And so he would call us in. We stayed about 2 weeks in this house at Whitefield, and we had bhajans with him every night. And then he sent us up to Puja Party. And in Puja Party, he saved, in those days, the mandir for bhajans, on the men's side, it was about half full. And on the women's side, about 3/4 full. And that was it for bhajans. And there was bhajans at 11 a.m. and bhajans again in the evening at, I think it was 6:30 or something like that. And 2 darshans, plus a balcony darshan at 6 a.m. after the Nagas and Kirtan. And he saved 2 front rows for us foreigners, the 20 of us. And he just gave us a lot of love and a lot of grace. And around August of that year, 1970, I had to go to Madras, which is now Chennai, of course, to get a new passport. And so Swami gave me his blessing to go. And on the train platform in, I guess Bangalore is now Bengaluru, there was a Brindavan Express that went from Bengaluru to Chennai. And on the platform, a man came up to me and he said, "I saw you in Whitefield, and where are you going? I said, well, I'm going to get my new passport at the American Consulate. And he said, well, why don't you come and stay with us? And he took me to a bhajan in a suburb. The suburb, I believe, was called Ambattur. And he said, at this bhajan, when Swami's pleased with the bhajans, the garlands will dance back and forth like this in time to the bhajan. So we're in this private house with a nice sized bhajan, and they had the pictures of all the Swami and the different, Krishna, Rama, and family gurus kind of leaning out from the wall with the garlands hanging. And so they were having bhajans and nothing was happening. So they said, Mr. Howard, you please lead the bhajan. So when I started to lead the bhajan, all of a sudden the garland started to dance back and forth in time, and also the flowers on top of the pictures would spin around and fly into Swami's chair. And then it all stopped when I stopped. And then some other people led bhajans in. They said, Mr. Howard, you please, lead another bhajan. And so I led another bhajan. And again, the garland started to dance back and forth. This was Swami's miracle. I mean, he was hundreds of miles away in Puttaparthi. And this was the first sort of miracle I saw away from Swami. And when I came back, he kind of hit me on the back with a big grin in the darshan line, like a friendly slap on the back and laugh. So in 1971, I had to go to Sri Lanka because my visa was up. And Swami gave me his blessings to go, and he had Mr. Kasturi write a letter to the head of the Sai organization in Colombo and said that I should speak and tell my experiences, right? And then Swami said to me in the interview, he says, oh, you can go in my car. My car is going to Bangalore for repair, and you can ride in my car. And he had little Fiat in those days with orange curtains in the back. So just before I was about to get in the car in front of the mandir, one of the college boys runs out of the mandir with a bag of vibhuti packets. So I had this bag, and I thought, oh, Swami's giving me vibhuti packets and a blessing for my journey. So I get all the way to Rameshwaram to take the ferry to Sri Lanka. And in Rameshwaram, they say to me, you need a cholera shot. And I said, well, I don't have a cholera shot. And he said, well, they won't let you in. So you have to go get a cholera shot. And then there's like a 1 week quarantine period. I said, well, what do I do for a week? He says, so the man in the customs, he said, well, why don't you go to Madurai and see the Meenakshi temple? And I thought, okay, that's a good idea. And he said, you can get your cholera shot in Madurai and enjoy Madurai and all the sights. He said, it's a beautiful city. So I took an overnight train to Madurai. I arrived at the train station. Oh, so by the way, in the car to Bangalore, Swami's Fiat, I counted the vibhuti packets, and there were 50 packets of vibhuti. Because, a 3-hour car ride, you have nothing to do, so I counted them. And so I get to Madurai, the train station, early in the morning, and there's somebody sleeping on the counter. In India, people sometimes they sleep at their jobs. And he had a thin blanket over him. So I shook him and I woke him up. And I asked him, I said, where do I go to get a cholera shot? And oh, yes, and he made me a map, right? So I follow this map, and it gets me to the Sri Satya Sai nursing home. I ring the doorbell. I asked, the nurse comes to the doorbell, and I said, is this where I get a cholera shot? She said, no, dear. She said, you're on the wrong side of town. This is not the right place. I said, well, I just came from Puttaparthi. And she said, oh, the doctor would love to meet you. Please come in. I'll go call him, So I'm sitting in the doctor's office, and he comes out, and he has his lungi on, and it's early in the morning. And he said, oh, you just came from Puttaparthi. He said, a few days back, I wrote Swami a letter, and I asked him to send me 50 packets of vibhuti. So I said, well, I took out my little bag, and I said, I happen to have 50 packets of vibhuti, so this must be Swami's way of delivering it to you. So that is another miraculous thing that Swami did, And oh my God, there's just so many things. And so later on, back in 1977, we went in July, and Swami performed a double wedding for Richie Kaplowitz and Michelle and VJ and Wesley Huffman. And he materialized the earrings for the brides, and it was a lovely time. And in my private interview, he said, "Come back next year for summer course." And I had attended the first summer course in 1972, and there were only two Western students at that summer course, myself and a young man from Britain. And this is a interesting thing. At the end of the summer course, he called all the boys in the front room of the old Whitefield bungalow, and he said, "I want to give you my calling card," right? So he used to give little calling cards, with his photo and his address, Sri Satya Sai Baba, Prashanti Nilayam, Anantapur district. So he goes like this, and he materializes a stack of calling cards, but they had a rubber band around them. And when he peeled them off, they had the smell of the photography lab on them. But he made them instantly, and just enough for every student, all the boy students in the room. And I thought that was very interesting. So anyway, in 77, he said, "Come next year for summer course," in 1978, right? And then I came back in 78, attended the summer course. And when he finally called me in, I was living in New York at the time, up in Westchester County. And I said, "Swami, I want to move to California." I wanted to move to California because I had bad allergies in New York, and I wanted to be in a warmer climate, and I wanted to go back. I had been in San Francisco in 1967, and I wanted to go back there. So then, and I said, "Swami, I want to have a career that uses my brains and my talent." And he said, "What do you really want to do?" And I said, "Swami, I want to, what?" So when he said, "What do you really want to do?" I said immediately, "Well, if I had my choice, I'd rather stay here and work for you." So this is like 1978, right? So he says, yes, I'm building a planetarium. And he said, "You go and get planetarium training and come back, right, next year." So this was like, I had never even thought about planetariums very much. I had gone as a child in school, field trip in New York to the Hayden Planetarium, but I never really even considered it. Okay, so Swami said, so I said, "Okay, we'll see. And then he said to me, "There's a planetarium in California." So, so I come back to New York, and my friend John Gilbert, who was also a Sai devotee, late John Gilbert, he said to me, "There's a planetarium conference in Washington, D.C., and we should go down and find out where you can get planetarium training," right? So we take the train from New York to Washington, D.C. We go to this planetarium conference, and there's only one planetarium in the whole country where you could take planetarium training without a Bachelor of Science degree, and it was San Francisco State University. And I wanted to move to San Francisco, and Swami had said in that interview, "There's a planetarium in California," right? So I take the planetarium training. I took 6 months in New York, then I came out to San Francisco, January 79, took 6 months at San Francisco State. Then I went back to India, and the planetarium was canceled, right? So meanwhile, when I was doing the training, there was a young woman about the same age as me who was a professor of physics and astronomy. And we got into a relationship, right? And I loved her very much, and I wanted to marry her. And she was going to go to China and India. And I said, "Stop and see Swami and ask him if we're supposed to be married." And I gave her a letter to give to Swami. And she said, when she came back, she said to me, "Swami doesn't want us to be married." He took the letter, he read it, and he gave it back to me, and he just gave me a look and walked away. And I felt like the answer is no, right? So when she told me that, I was very, 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 very upset, as you can imagine. And I was so angry with Swami. I mean, really, really angry. And I felt like he was just destroying my chance for happiness. And I was lying on my bed in my room. This is in San Francisco. This is, I think, 1980, the August of 1980. So 45 years ago. I was lying in my bed in my room, and I had these bamboo blinds which filtered the street lamps. So there was some light, but it wasn't pitch dark. And all of a sudden I hear and I was saying to Swami, "I hate you, I never want to see you again," and like that, it being very emotional. Then I hear it sounded like two firecrackers go off inside my head. And it was really weird. And then all of a sudden there was a blaze of light, and Swami appeared out of that blaze of light from the waist up. He was above me. I reached up and I held his hand. He held my hand and he said, "Don't worry, I'm always with you." And he appeared, you know, I mean, it was like something out of a storybook, but it was a real experience, you know. And 6 years later, when I did go back and do the planetarium, you know, my last interview. So he gave me, when I was leaving after I had finished the planetarium and got the first show going for the opening of the school season in that June of 1986, he called me in 3 times. And in one interview, he leaned over in his chair and he said to me, 6 years back, there was that girl you wanted to marry. So he was confirming that vision that I had, that apparition of him actually appearing in my room, you know. And those are just some of the many miraculous things that Swami has done. In 2014, I was diagnosed with chronic lymphocytic leukemia. Swami came in my dream. He squeezed my hand as if to say, everything's going to be okay. And by 2023, my leukemia was undetectable. And I completely recovered from it. So I feel like he's always been with me. He's been there in the most important times of my life, you know. And even when in that moment in 1980, when I was so angry with him and I felt, you know, like I was done with him, he appeared to me in my room like that. And he's come in my dreams. Well, the last few years, you know, everything's been going really well. And maybe I had a dream some years back where he gave me a darshan, but I just feel like he's always with me. He's always with all of us. You know, he said to me, "I'm in you and around you. I'm always with you." And in 1971, Christmas Day, he made this locket for me. I was going back to America. I had been in India 3 years and 9 months. And he had come up to me early. We were in Chennai, and it was in Madras. And he had come up to me early morning in the darshan at the house he was staying. And he said, "I'm going to the hospital to see Walter Cohen." And many of you might know the story of his resurrection of Walter Cohen, who died of a heart attack. And he said, "Wait here, I'll be back in 1 hour." But he didn't come back, you know. And so Michelle, who always could find out Swami's program, she found out that he had gone to see the widow of the former chief minister of Chennai, which was then Madras, of course. And she had a vague idea of where the house was. So we get into a taxi and we're going around this very, very nice, very posh area of Chennai, you know, with beautiful homes. And in the taxi, I prayed to Swami and I said, "Swami, can you give me a talisman to protect me in America?" Because that evening, my flight was 6 p.m. So we finally see a house with a beautiful colored pandal set up. We go to their house and Swami's there, right? So he calls us in for an interview. It was me and India and her sister Vijay and a couple from Hawaii. And when it was my turn, he looked at me and he said, "You have doubts, you know?" And I said, "Swami, what should I do? What should I do about my doubts?" He said, "Only young age passing clouds." This is 1971. And then he went like this and he made this for me and he put it in my pocket. He said, "Keep this with you in America." And on the back is the hand, the Abhayastam. It says, "Why fear when I am here?" Right? And I asked for the talisman. And in the front is Shirdi Sai with a little TPS, which meant Tara Pudapati Satya, the star of heaven. Satya, the star of heaven. So that was 1971. So, and I've had this around my neck since Christmas Day, 1971. And you know, I've been all over the world in my work and career with putting on yoga retreats and everything. And I've just felt like he's protected me everywhere. I was in Kenya one time and I was at a bus station, right? And it was between Nairobi and the island of Lamu, and you had to change buses. And I went in the bus station. I swear I was the only white person. I saw one other white person in the distance. I go and sit next to him and he's reading Dr. Sandweiss's book, The Holy Man and the Psychiatrist. So what are the odds of that? These things would happen to me all the time, you know? We were putting on a yoga retreat in Mexico. I got the ferry to Cancun. There was one seat. It was very crowded. I make my way to that seat, stepping over people's luggage. I sit next to a lady. She's reading a Sai Baba book. So in so many little ways, he's shown me that he's always with me. And he's always with all of us. And I think any of us who are in the orbit of Swami we're very blessed. And even though we all have our trials and tribulations, Swami's always with us. He's always in us. He's always around us, and he's always there for us. He always said he was Kalpavruksha, right? The wish-fulfilling tree. Yes. So it's been pretty incredible. What can I say? I feel very lucky in many ways. And I wrote 2 books. Good Chances came out in 1985 at the World Conference. It was published by the Sai Center in Tustin. And then Heart to Heart came out in 91. So, and they're online. Good Chances is online. People can read it online now. So it has all the stories, we used to follow Swami everywhere. We would have taxis ready. We'd have things in the taxi, so we wouldn't even have to run back to our room. If Swami left, we would get in the taxi. And Swami used to say, when I say follow me, I mean follow my message, not follow me in taxi cabs. But we loved following Swami all over the place and seeing him wherever he went. And there were always huge crowds wherever he went.
Yes. Sairam, Brother Howard, thank you so much for sharing your stories. I just love how you began in 1970 when you walked into the white field for the first time. Yeah. And then the next day, Swami calls you in and says that when devotees long for God, God also longs for devotee. And it gives the an analogy of stalactite and stalagmite. So that's just so amazing and so wonderful to hear that. And then beginning from that, your journey has seen vast miracles, from being far away from Swami and seeing garland move when you're singing, to being in California, to getting a vision of Swami coming to you at a time when you were very quite upset at him for the choices that you had to make. And then, of course, the time you were supposed to go to Sri Lanka, instead, Swami had other plans. You think you're going to Sri Lanka, but because you needed that cholera shot, you ended up at Sri Satya Sai nursing home, where they were expecting 50 counts of vibhuti. So you have been used as instrument. You have witnessed so many different types of miracles of Swami, and just love how close you were with Swami in terms of proximity, and for Swami to interact with you in very casual manner, and to be in his presence like that. So thank you, Brother Howard, for sharing your beautiful story.
Thank you. Thank you for asking me to share. I love to share my stories, and as long as I'll be 79 years old, so 80 in Indian counting this November, and as long as I'm still here, I want to share stories with whoever wants to hear them. So thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Howard. Sairam, dear listeners, thank you for listening to Sai Soul 100 with Brother Howard Levin. I'm Prabha Swaminathan. Until next time, Jai Sairam.